What's going on, everybody? James here from Artificial Entertainment, and today we're continuing on with the Dynamic Parkour Trace System Full Setup Guide. And in this segment, we're going to be focusing on setting up the miscellaneous actions, so let's go ahead and dive in. Alright, so we have here the project that we have set up the vaulting, mantling, slide, added the modifications, and the tic-tac actions. So in this video, we're going to be setting up the dive through window, vertical wall climb to ledge, and attach to ledge from air actions. Now, one thing to note specifically about the attach to ledge from air and the vertical wall climb to ledge is that these are climb initiation actions. So they're basically transitional actions that put you from the ground into a climbing state or from the air into a climbing state. So as such, this is going to start kind of moving into the climbing a little bit. We're going to be covering a lot more in the actual climbing video when we get to that point, but we're going to be kind of starting to set up certain pieces that we're going to need for climbing later on, and then kind of go through and make it all proper when we get to the climbing section of the series. So the first thing I want to set up is we're going to do the dive through window action. So basically something like this, where we have a nice opening in the area, no collision. We can actually, put our character through this opening. So what we're going to do is, I do have animations that I've kind of gathered just to make it easier. We have a dive roll here, which, I mean, realistically, for this particular action type, you can use a dodge dive or anything like that as well. It's basically anything that has some sort of like jump and then a roll and hit the ground. That's basically really all you need. And also, as always, root motion. So what we're going to do is just right click and then create in a montage. Then we'll open this up and we'll start adding in some warp points to the animation. Now, realistically, this operates very similar to the slide. So we're going to add a new notify track, right click, and add a notify state, and then motion warping. Now what we're going to do is put it in the start point in the beginning and scrub to when he kind of gets to his full, like, we're going through the object. Something right about there, I would say, would be a good point. And then we're going to look at when he starts, And then we're going to look at when he starts to kind of get into his land, which is right, I would say, about there. And then we're going to right click, add notify, and reset parkour action. Now for the motion warp here, we're going to go to the root motion modifier, warp target name here at the top, and we're going to change this to warp 1. And we're going to keep ignore z-axis, we're going to uncheck that, and we're also going to uncheck the warp rotation. I'm sorry, actually, we're going to keep warp rotation checked, my apologies. So now we'll just save this, minimize, and we're going to go to our character blueprint now so we can actually set up the action. So in the third person blueprints, BP third person character. And then we already have the miscellaneous actions here thanks to when we were doing the slide setup. So if you don't have this in yet, you didn't follow the slide modifications video, it's totally fine. Under the interfaces section here, action events, you'll see miscellaneous actions right here. Now, to be able to get our animation inside of here, we're just going to go and back to it in the tab here, select it utilizing this little folder with the magnifying glass icon here, go back to my character, and then click on the little arrow next to dive through window. This way it'll put the animation inside of that slot. Now I'm going to compile, save, go to the Dynamic Parkour Trace System, expand the settings menu here a little bit. Now, I am going to do the override motion warp and action output settings, just like always, and then we're going to go up to the ground action settings, miscellaneous actions, allowed miscellaneous actions, and we're going to set the dive through window as true. Now, as I said earlier, the dive through window operates very similar to the slide, where we can choose and define the height and width of the area that we're going to be going through. So if it's beyond or lesser than these values, it will not choose this action. So I'm just going to go ahead and compile and save. And again, we do have the override motion warp actions there, so we can go ahead and hit play. And if we go up to this window here, you're going to see that there's a warp 1, the yellow point there. It's right in the dead center of the window. So what we can do now is we know that warp 1 is being represented. We know our dive is being selected. So we're going to override motion warp and action output settings. We're going to set that to false, compile, save. And now we'll play this time. And if we go and we hit the spacebar, you can see that he dives through the window. And also if we go up here, it's vertical wall climb to ledge, so I can go ahead and just kind of take this whole thing here and just move it down a little bit. And if I go up to it now, you can see we can vault over this, then we can dive through this. And because of the fact that it's always detecting the height, you can see that he's actually, going a little lower this time, but he's still landing and, doing what he's supposed to do. So this is where, we can really kind of change how the behavior is going to be based off of how your map is set up. So now that we got the dive roll through window, I guess, basically, the next one that we're going to work on is going to be the vertical wall climb to ledge. Now, as I had said earlier, the vertical wall climb to ledge and the attach to ledge from air are climb initiation actions. So there's going to be a couple things that we're going to do that are going to be kind of a temporary quick and dirty setup, and then we're going to do the better, more proper version when we get to the actual climbing videos. But the action type that we're looking at, if we open up the wall run L1 animation that I have here, if I click on play, you can see he kind of does a scamper up the wall and then hangs at the ledge at the edge of the at the end of the animation. So essentially, it's a climb triggering animation, and we know that it's meant to be used from a lower point on the ground because he scampers up the wall before actually attaching to the ledge point. So what we can do is we'll minimize, right click, and we'll create the anim montage, and then we'll double click to open this up. And what we're going to do before we actually do this is we're going to enable the vertical wall climb to ledge option here under the miscellaneous action settings, allowed miscellaneous actions under the ground action settings. And then we're going to override the motion warp again, just so we can see the warp points without something being triggered. And then we're going to go up to this wall, and you can see that warp 4 is kind of the point right in front of the wall next to the character. Warp 1 is kind of a little bit below, kind of showing the root bone position by the time we reach the edge. So we know that we're going to use warp 4 and warp 1 to be able to get up to the point. So we'll go under notifies, add notify track, right click, add notify state, motion warping, and then we'll go ahead and just kind of scrub where he gets to the wall position, which is going to be, I'd say right about there. And then we'll say warp target name is going to be warp 4, ignore z-axis uncheck, and you can use warp rotation if you want. It's not really going to cause any problems if you keep it checked. And then from here, we're going to scrub through to right about where he reaches the ledge, or at least the root bone will stop moving, which would be right about here, I think. So he just kind of goes and attaches to the ledge there. So we'll do right about there. Now we'll just go right click, add notify state, motion warping, and we're going to align the start position where this one ends, and then the end position where our timeline tracker is. And this one we're just going to name to warp 1. And then we're going to do the ignore z-axis uncheck and leaving warp rotation check. This one you do want to make sure to leave checked because of the fact that it's going to make sure to align you to the ledge's rotation. Now, as I've said a few times now, these are climb initiation actions. So what we're going to do is instead of using the reset parkour action notify, we're actually going to right click, add notify, and we're going to use the set climbing notify instead. And now we'll go ahead and just save. And we'll go to the BP third person character. And we'll actually just select this here by using the magnifying folder icon there. And then we'll throw this into the vertical wall climb option there. And then we'll uncheck the override motion warp setting there. Now, before I go up to the wall here and do an action, I just want to note that we are missing an element, which is what we're going to set up next. But I just want to show you how it's, you can see now that it's triggering and aligning to the wall. But our idle animation is not proper. And that's just because of the animation blueprint. So, and this is where we're going to get into that quick and dirty works for now option, and then we're going to kind of reset it up later for a better version. So inside of my animation blueprint here, this is inside of just the regular event graph. I'm going to grab an update animation, so event blueprint update animation. You might already have this in your graph, and if you do, you don't have to add it in. I'm not using the update animation for all of my movement stuff, so I have it freed up and I can use it here. Now, what we're going to do is grab off the BP third-person character. We're going to pull off and grab the dynamic parkour trace. And then we scroll down to the very bottom. You'll see get dynamic parkour trace system. And we're just going to pull off of this and get is valid. And we're going to get the question mark here. And if it is valid, we're going to pull off of the parkour system again and get active climb style. So this is going to be like basically whether or not we are or are not currently actively climbing. So we can pull off of this, promote to a variable, hook it up off of is valid, and boom, there we go. Now we're going to go to our anim graph here, and we're going to hook the base locomotion, or unhook the base locomotion, I'm sorry, from a default slot. Now your animation blueprint might be more complex than this, and that's totally fine. Realistically, I do recommend adding the climb style stuff at the end, so that's kind of basically what we're going to be doing here. You have your default slot at the end, and then you go ahead and just kind of do modifications, and you can have whatever craziness you have up here. But what we're going to do is pull off of the default slot, and we're going to blend by bool, and we'll see blend poses by bool here. And then we're going to get the active climb style variable that we just made, pull off, and see if enum is equal to, And we want to make sure enum is equal to none. So if it's equal to none, we're going to use the base locomotion, just like this. However, if it's equal to false, we want to add a new state machine. So we're just going to type in state, and you'll see state machine right here. And we can just call this climb states. Double click, open it up. Off of entry, state, just call it climb. And then for right now, we're just going to grab the ledge idle animation that I have here. So this is just a standard ledge idle where you're just kind of like hanging off the ledge. There's some, minor movements and breathing and just some life to the animation, but ultimately he's just kind of hanging there. So we're going to go ahead and just put this off the results for right now, compile and save. So now essentially what we've done here is just created a basic, like whenever we're in a climbing state of any kind, it's just going to go ahead and use that as our idle animation once a montage is over. So we also want to make sure to set the blend times to 0 on these as well, compile and save. And then we're also going to want to go to our montage. So if we go back to the tutorial assets, animations, and the wall run montage here, we want to make sure the blend time is set to around 0.1. We want to have it blend out a little faster. This way we can make sure that it's blending out and then goes right into our main state here. So now if I compile, save, play here, and press the space bar, you can see that he now attaches to the ledge. However, he's a little bit under the ledge, and I'll show you something here that's interesting. So if I go ahead and scrub through the timeline here, and if I maybe pull this back, so you can see I'm pulling it back just ever so slightly, okay? And I'm pulling back the endpoint and the notify, just so that way I'm, pointing that out. And I go ahead and I climb up the object now. You can see that his hands are slightly more above it, right? Just a little bit. Now, if I pull it all the way back to frame 19 beginning here, and then I hit save, and then I play it one more time, you can see now his hands are above it, kind of sitting right on it perfectly. Little adjustments like this can sometimes be easier than trying to use the offsets. The offsets are just for like when you have the point and you need to adjust it so that way it's a little bit better. That's where the offsets come in. So you can use basically this entire action offsets menu here for every single action type to be able to adjust the overall location. But so now we have the wall run to ledge here. So we've got this action now. Now we can't necessarily go off the ledge yet. Because of the fact that we haven't set up any of the ledge actions. But we at least have the actual wall run and, ledge attachment set up now. So the last action we need to do is going to be the attach to ledge from air. And this one is a relatively simple action. So we're just going to go, and I do not have this animation here yet, so I'm just going to go and grab it really quickly from my animations folder. So into the ledge attach. And I'll go ahead and I'll throw this, collapsed my tutorial assets folder. There we go. So we'll copy it into there. Now, essentially what we're looking at is this, right? So he's going like from the falling state item animation style, and he's going in and just attaching to the ledge. Perfect. So what we're going to do is just right click, replace the skeleton with the retarget skeleton, and then we're going to make sure that root motion is enabled. Click save. And then we're going to right click, create anim montage. So now from here, we're basically going to do the same thing we did on the other one, except we're only going to use one single point here. So we're going to go to track, add notify track, right click, add notify state, motion warping, and we're going to look at right about where he attaches to the ledge. So we'll start right about here, and we'll kind of make adjustments as necessary. And then we'll also make sure to add notify and set climbing. Now the warp point that we're going to use is going to be warp 1. Now the reason why is warp 1 is always the height point whenever you're initiating climbing. So it's something to keep in mind whenever you're doing climb point jumps, things like that. Warp 1 is going to be kind of the base warp point that you're going to use for a lot of these action types. So if we go ahead and save that really quick, and we'll close this down, go back to our character blueprint, and then in the in the attach to ledge from falling here, we can go ahead and put the animation in. So attach, you'll see ledge attach montage, perfect, compile and save. Now we also need to make it so that way attach to ledge is an option in our montage, or our actions here. So under the ground action settings here, we're going to go into the miscellaneous actions, allowed miscellaneous actions, and attach to ledge from falling, we're going to set this to true. And then we'll compile and save. Now, the way the attach to ledge from falling works means that you actually have to be in a falling state, and it has to be a lower object. So you have to be able to actually like reach it from when you're in a falling state. So if I do this, you can see it attached perfectly. All I did was jump, and it found the ledge. And just to show you guys one more time here, all I'm doing is just I jump and then boom, attaches to the ledge. I can do the same thing with, like this area is over here. I can go ahead and I can attach the ledge. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if I go ahead and open up the character blueprint here and go into the in-air ledge search trace options, under trace options, we're going to set the trace channel, the draw debug type for 1 frame. And we're going to compile and save. And I just want to show you guys how the trace runs. So you can see that there is a trace that runs kind of forward from the character, and it's looking for something that the character can maybe attach to. So like in that instance, you can see it was able to find something. However, if you feel like this snapping, like it's going a little too far forward, or maybe it's too far down, you can use the values for the in-air ledge search trace options. You can use these 2 values to be able to adjust it. So if you want to make it so that way you can only find things 100 units forward, compile and save, we hit play now, you can see that the trace is running significantly closer to the character. Now, this is also going to mean that attaching to ledges are going to be a little bit harder in certain instances, but it also, as you can see there, made it so that way the attachment was significantly smoother when it found the ledge, but it makes it a little bit harder to find the ledge off of the get-go, and this is where there's a bit of a trade-off. So you ultimately just want to make it so that way you can define the distance and play around with it until, it's something that feels good for you. Now, while we're talking about settings here, before we close out the video, the last thing I want to talk about is the vertical wall climb to ledge options. Now, ultimately, you can define the settings based off of 2 different values for when a vertical wall climb can be taken. It's going to be anytime that there's an action or an object that is taller than whatever the value is set under the primary settings, object/obstacle classification options, and then under the wall height object max. Anything beyond 250 units is then going to be classified as too tall for a wall height object. As such, it's going to need to then use the vertical wall climb to ledge, and then this is the setting for setting how high that can go. So like this is the value minimum, and this is the value maximum. Now, one other thing as well is that there is a rotation match, so this way you can ensure that the action is not taken if you're facing too far away from the actual wall's surface. So for example, if I'm facing this way, and I'm facing kind of like 90 degrees from the wall, you can see that it doesn't actually do the action. However, if I'm facing the wall, it does do the action. However, because the wall is up higher than what I'm allowing it to be, it's putting a bit of an offset. There we go. So, and the reason why that happens, just to show you guys as well, is under the object/obstacle trace options, you can see max trace height is 650 units. Vertical wall climb max height is 650 units. So if I set this to, let's say, 660, something just slightly higher than what we can trace, just so that way the trace is kind of telling us, okay, this is our max height. We can't really find anything beyond that. If I go ahead and just do this now, you can see that now he attaches kind of appropriately. So it's all about playing with the settings and the values and seeing what feels the best for what you are trying to accomplish. Now, the next video, we're going to be looking at the gap action types, which is going to be the jump across and dropping down to ledges and, falling going into a falling state from ledges and stuff like that. So some really cool actions we're going to be going over in the next video. Wall running is going to be its own video. That's why we're kind of leaving this for right now, because there's a lot with wall running that you can do. So I wanted to put this in its own video. But ultimately, that's pretty much all there is when it comes to setting up the, the dive through window and the additional miscellaneous actions for attaching to a ledge from air, or doing the vertical wall climb to be able to reach said ledge. And, like I said, we're going to cover more information about climbing when we get to that video. It's going to be coming up after the gap action video. Should be coming out very, very shortly. But if you guys have any questions, concerns, comments, feel free to hit me up in the Discord or hit me up in the comment section. I always try to monitor both as frequently as I can. But I hope to see you guys in the next video. It's going to close it out for now. But as always, stay tuned and stay animated.